This is the Horse Radio Network.
You're listening to The Stall and Stable Show, ideas for happy horsekeeping.
Welcome to part 2 of the HRN Host Series on Stall and Stable. The saying goes, if you ask 10 different horse people how to do something, you'll get 10 different answers. I decided to put that adage to the test and ask 10 different horse people their opinions about what qualifies for happy horsekeeping. Those 10 people happen to be my Horse Radio Network colleagues, all horse professionals in some way, shape, or form, and all with a similar horse-first philosophy when it comes to keeping, training, and competing their horses. In this episode, I chat with Piper Klemm, publisher of the Plaid Horse magazine and host of the Plaidcast. We talk about what best practices she employs to keep her lease ponies healthy and happy, as well as other trends in the equestrian industry that support a more holistic approach to caring for show horses. Piper has some great insight, so listen in. This is episode 83 of the Stall and Stable Show, brought to you by Lucas Equine Equipment. Today's Friday, October 29th, 2021. I'm your host, Helena Harris. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. In addition to Lucas Equine, we're grateful for the support of Tangent Materials. If you're tired of rotting broken fences, it's time to talk to Tangent. If you want perimeter fencing that's safe and durable with a classic style, it's time to talk to Tangent. If you want to spend more time with your horses and less time worrying about your farm, it's time to talk to Tangent Materials, makers of premium HDPE lumber that looks just like wood, but without the worry. To learn more, go to stallandstable.com/fencing. Welcome back, listeners. This is part 2 in my series on HRN hosts and what they do to help keep their horses happy and healthy. But before we get started, I want to let you know that I'll be moderating a Strider Professional Development webinar on Tuesday, November 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Joining me for this roundtable discussion on proven business models in the horse world will be Colton Woods, Lauren Spryzer, and Olympian Doug Payne. It's going to be a really interesting conversation, so I hope you'll join me. For more information, go to stallandstable.com. My guest today is Piper Klemm, Ph.D. She's publisher and editor-in-chief of the Plaid Horse magazine. She started the Plaid Horse in 2014, so she's been around for a while. Piper's also wicked smart, as we say here in New England. She has a Ph.D. in chemistry from the University of California, Berkeley, and is also an active member of the hunter-jumper community, owning a fleet of lease ponies and showing her own horse, MTM Sandwich, in the adult hunter divisions. In addition to the Plaid Horse, Piper pursues her commitment to education by teaching various college courses. So let's welcome Piper to Stall and Stable. Hi, Piper, and welcome to the Stall and Stable Show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to have you for a couple of reasons, but the one that I'm most excited about is really getting to know you. We both work with Horse Radio Network in slightly different capacities. You have, though, a powerhouse equestrian media empire behind you. And yes, I'm going to call it an empire because there's a lot of hard work that goes into what you do. Tell us about the Plaid Horse and then the Plaidcast.
Absolutely. I've always been an educator. I still run in the academic circles. I teach college courses, and growing up in the industry, I never knew how to get the information I wanted. It wasn't like today where you can just, everything is ready for you to consume it. And I never really could figure out how I could get the information I wanted. I always wanted to think about things, and, you would ask your trainer questions and they'd be like, just stop. So after, and I read and watched everything I could get my hands on, which wasn't much then. And when I finished graduate school, I really I took a break a little bit to focus on school. And when I came back to the sport, it was like social media was just starting, and I really saw the opportunity for education. My problem was that no one would listen to me. And I was like, well, if no one's going to listen to me and see this opportunity, I'm doing it myself. and I had no idea what I was doing, but I had no choice. So I learned, and I think that's one of the most powerful things in this industry. When you have no choice, you learn. So everything has been completely built brick by brick. We work every day at this. Education's my passion. And I think however people want to be educated is amazing. If you want to read, that's great. If you want to listen, that's great. If you want to take college courses and have other people respect how much you've learned, that's great. I think that we get so pigeonholed sometimes into what reading and learning looks like. I think there can be a lot of learning that happens on social media. I think social media has evolved into a place where people can find stuff to deep dive, to learn about, instead of being the exact place to learn that it was when I first started on this. And so I do frequently encourage people to put their phones down and watch their horses and observe. Everything we do is about education. And the Plaidcast, you can ask Glenn, I begged everyone for years to do the podcast instead of me because I just wanted to listen to a podcast about horse shows. I didn't want to host one. And, after years of Glenn being like, you should just do it.
When you talk about deep diving, I think sometimes when we are trying to get people to listen or to learn, you have to dive down into a topic at a very granular level. And I think with a chemistry background, you can go down as deep as one needs to go in order to cherry pick the pieces of information that you can then package together at the top level and serve up to people, because there is so much media, there is so much content available today. Our jobs as educators or informers or entertainers is to make it as consumable for them as possible, or as palatable for them as possible. And I'm a podcast fan too, like you. I just want to listen. But the conversations weren't happening. So I thought, well, let's just do this myself and start asking the questions. And that's what's so much fun is, while it's hard to do, right? We've got all these balls in the air. While it's hard to find the time, I wouldn't trade these conversations for anything because of what I've learned and the people I've met. You have a lot of contacts in your career and have learned a lot. But you're primarily involved in the hunter jumper world. Do you get to venture out of that a little bit with the Plaidcast, or do you try to focus on what you know best?
I do a little bit, but I think, one of the things I noticed is that I differentiate it between the sport and the industry. And the sport has always had great coverage, the Olympics and, the super big horse shows and all that kind of stuff. But I never felt like the industry got much coverage. And I think that's changed. I think we've really led the way on that. But we have so many articles that are like, what to do when that 2-foot hunter derby seems terrifying, and all that stuff, because the industry is who most people are. The sport people are very few. The sport people are Laura Kraut and Jesse Springsteen and Brian Mowgre. It's a very small group. Whereas the industry people are like you and me and everyone who has a horse and rides and loves horses and is a fan. And so our mission is really to serve the industry. And even though we're, quote unquote, just in the hunter jumper horse show space, when you start serving that industry top to bottom, it is massive. I mean, we are distributed at over 1,500 horse shows, and we're just talking horse shows. Their IEA in the pandemic last year had over 1,000 horse shows, just IEA shows. Yeah. And we have IHSA, we have other kinds of collegiate riding. There's 6 types of collegiate riding. Over 400 schools have an IHSA team.
And degree programs now in the
degree
industry.
Programs, yes.
You can be an equestrian professional, whereas before you were, look at her. That's her hobby. She loves horses. She's trying to make a living at it. And that is completely turned upside down now. And you're seeing that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And that's like such a small sliver, even what I said. I mean, then we have the vendors and the sponsors, and we have people riding at all levels. So by the time we get to the schooling shows and the B shows and the A shows and the medal finals, every little facet of how complicated our sports become, it is a massive undertaking. I went to Land Rover this year and did some coverage there. We're going to have some coverage of the Maryland 5-star. We have other stuff going on, and I love to meet with all horse people, and I love to go to new things and new adventures and see things I've never seen before. But at the same time, our plate is full covering just horse shows.
Well, I'll have to hook you up with my daughter. She will be attending the Maryland 5-star. This is her it'll be her first time at a 5-star. She's just immersing herself in the eventing world, having come from, she was an IEA rider. And she's like, Mom, those jumps are huge. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about your own horses. You have ponies. You've got a fleet of lease ponies. Mm-hmm. Where do you keep you ride? Tell us about your horses, your ponies, where you keep them, and what you do with them.
Yep. So right now I have 3 personal horses, and they're forever horses. And then I also have my pony business, which is separate. When I was growing up, my parents, my well-intentioned parents got me an unbroke 2-year-old when I was 12. And we're like, oh, like, have fun. And the horror story is horror story. Like I said in the beginning, when you have to figure something out, you do. It might take you a while, but you do. And I figured it out. And my parents let me make a lot of the business decisions, and they let me make a lot of decisions. And it was my project, and I really appreciate that. So I started leasing her out when I was a teenager.
Okay.
And then my parents said that when I paid them back for everything that they had spent on my riding, that she could be mine.
How many years you got left on that?
Yeah, every shoe, every blanket. So when I was 19, I bought them out. That was after leasing for a few years. And then through college and grad school, I kind of just had her out there. And then I decided that I was a genius. I mean, this is the horse person's curse, right? You get one that's actually goes and it's good, and you decide you're a genius. And I decided I was a genius, so I went out and bought 3 more.
I think you decided you were an entrepreneur.
Yeah. But then you learn so fast what you don't know.
There's 2 places where you really learn humility. That's on the back of the horse and at the helm of a business.
So I learned humility really fast on that one. And then, to me, it ended up being about partnerships and relationships. Everything in my business, in the Plaid Horse, it's, even Horse Radio Network, like all of this stuff, it's about partnerships and about relationships. And if you have the right people you're working with, any project that's a good idea can work. And if you don't have the right people you're working with, no matter how good an idea is, it will never go anywhere. So I ended up seeking out and meeting Emily Ellick, started running the ponies through her business and training with her. And over time, we became really good friends, and it's been such a fruitful collaboration. It's been almost 10 years now. And
wow.
I love how she does things. I love how she always puts a pony first. She never gets greedy. She's now established herself into one of the largest pony dealers in North America. She sells her leases.
Tell me a little bit about how the pony lease process works.
Yeah. Children grow in size and ability very quickly. So often when you do the math, by the time you buy and sell one and take that risk, you're out a significant amount of money. And then, a lot of families do devalue ponies, and that's not a conversation we want to have. But you might buy a pony for a certain amount of money, and after a year of your child being on it, it's worth less money because your child put some dings on its record that and I don't think that's a conversation we need to have sometimes. Like leasing, having an end date saying, we're here for this experience and we're here for the 12 months or whatever it is. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Emily always says, get Mr. Right now, not Mr. Right. Because if you're going to get a horse that's too much for your kid where they are right now, I see it over and over. Like kids get scared and then maybe they quit riding, or they don't find the joy in it anymore, or it doesn't become their refuge. Like being safe and being productive on one that will advance you where your skills are right now, even if you might move past that pony ability or size-wise in a year, that's okay.
Yeah, and I think it relieves us from the social pressure of when you get an animal, you have to keep it forever. Even some, human relationships are like that.
Yep.
In my opinion, I think all relationships have a shelf life. Yep. Some of those shelf lives are much longer than others, but I think it removes the pressure. And then I think it enables the pony to live a happier, healthier life because it's not subjected to the stress or the tension that maybe the owners or the riders have because that pony has become not the right pony for them at that point.
Yep.
So your ponies are assured your oversight. So you own them, you manage them, you care for them,
the match is so important. Emily, one of her genius points in all of this, and she's got absolutely encyclopedic knowledge. She knows every pony 5 generations back. She knows every barn in this country. She knows how much turnout they have. She knows how much they lesson, how much they practice versus horse show, how often their pros ride versus the kids ride. She has all of this in her head. It's like, it's unreal, like matrix math that goes on in there. And she matches every pony specifically. And that way we're able to keep the ponies happy and healthy. If the ponies last, I mean, that's good business for us. And it's also the right moral thing for the pony. It's the right thing for the animal to match them to a place where they're going to be successful and match them to a division and a trainer. And some ponies that might be really good at the division in one home might only do the children's in another home because they practice more. Or, this barn likes to lunge a lot and, this pony's not going to hold up to that. And finding that, and even down to the littlest things like, oh, this program is really good with ponies that are a little on the hotter side, but, they tend to struggle training ponies that are on the quieter side or sulk a little bit. And it's matching that everything down. And the other thing is, by having so many ponies and by having a stock of so many animals available all the time, she can swap things out, make things right. There's a lot more ability to, the kid grew faster than you thought they would, or, something like that. And there's ability to have different scenarios that only volume could afford you.
Since Stall and Stable is primarily about best practices in horse keeping, that can be as broad as we want it to be. So in your case, in your ponies, making sure that they're adaptable. When they do go to a new home, they can adjust. What do you think is an ideal environment for these kinds of ponies? Are you putting them out in big pastures? We know ponies have special needs. How do you ensure or do your best to ensure consistency from your home to theirs or one home to the next?
Yeah. It's really custom, as we said, based on the pony. I mean, some ponies, obviously, founder or laminitic changes are a concern. And again, this is where her knowledge of the breeding and stuff, she knows every stallion and says, oh, this one might start having changes at this age if they're by this one. And so like everything is down to a science and into data buckets like that, which is really fascinating. She really believes in the constant eating. There's hay in front of them all of the time. She's not afraid of alfalfa. They get very little grain. Some of them are on a grain-free diet with just some balancers or something like that. Obsessed with their stomachs. These ponies are traveling all the time. They're shipping a lot, and just making sure that their stomachs are always comfortable. They get ulcer guard and all that stuff to travel. So really making sure that they're prepared that way. It's in all the lease contracts, what that pony needs and what it needs to do. We spell out everything.
That is great.
It's a full contract.
So if a pony has to go from a dry lot to a dry lot, you make sure they're going to a dry lot.
Yep, absolutely. And that's where knowing the farms and having visited all the farms and talked to the trainers. I have one pony that I love, and she will absolutely eat like a goldfish and pop if allowed. And she's a small, and so like lots of people want to lease her for their tiny kid. And one of the stipulations we made early on is that if the kid is not cantering regularly and fearlessly, we can't keep the weight down on her. So, even just stuff like that. And so like I've had lots of people want that pony and, say to them, like, your kid is not cantering and not cantering enough that like you are in the best interest of this pony. And so it's so much stuff like that. And at her barn, she really believes in turnout. Everything's out and moving. We have high-end show horses, and they go out with each other, and they're really allowed to be like horses.
Let me stop you there. You have high-end show horses, but they all go out, and they're all allowed to be horses.
Yes.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. I don't hear it enough, and I think some disciplines are more open to all that turnout and all that risk. How do you feel with the clients that you're working with? Do they believe the same thing? Are they concerned, and do they try to bubble wrap these ponies? Tell me about those who are for and those who are against in your experience with that kind of practice for turnout.
I mean, some do and some don't, and we really try to match the ones that are going to be good there. There are a lot of people with just straight up geographic limitations, like California, Long Island, the barn's right outside Chicago, and those ponies we call California ponies or Chicago. They're the ponies that function very well without as much turnout, and are mentally and physically fine with that. And some of them are, and some of them adjust. I would say a lot of horses that come in from other programs as their purchase almost need to be trained to be horses. You put them out in the paddock and they're so confused and they're like, "Can I come in?" And you're like, "No."
Yeah. Go be a horse. When you get your horses back, when you get your ponies back from a lease situation, how long usually do they hang out with you? And kind of, to me, I'm thinking, all right, they're coming home from their work life, and then maybe they'll have a little spa day, or they'll have a couple of months where they get to just decompress before they move on to their next job. Is that what happens, or in varying degrees?
Yeah, it depends on what they need. We really try to make sure that everyone comes home at least every 2 years. So if they don't come home in 1 year, they come home in 2 years, so that they have all of our people getting their eyes on them. We have an incredible farrier, Kendra Skorstad, that we've had on the Plaidcast a few times. My show horse is actually barefoot, and he's shown all over the country barefoot. And my other ones aren't, because it's not the right call for them. But to have Kendra, she's really, she has x-rays and she has files on all of them, so that we can look back on stuff and we know what's happening. Big on body work. And a lot of people are well-intentioned and are not in areas of the country where their technical staff is extremely proficient. And it is what it is. You lease to a lot of these areas where there isn't a critical mass of show barns to really employ a sport horse vet in that area, or a sport horse farrier. And we all know, it is so different shoeing a horse for every discipline. And Kendra is a sport horse farrier, and that is her whole thing. And so really getting all of our support team, body work, farrier, vet work, getting their teeth done. A lot of dentists all over the country maybe aren't at the level that you are. And you talk about healthy stomachs and healthy long-term, their teeth need to be perfect. And so getting all of that stuff handled. So it's kind of like the NASCAR, pit crew. The pony walks in and it has all of the physical stuff to it. Sometimes they've learned some behavioral thing that needs to be corrected before they go back out.
Yeah.
My general rule of thumb is that if they are ever routinely spending more than 3 months at home, they're probably not a very good lease pony. And that doesn't mean that they're not a good pony and they wouldn't be a great pony for a family to have for a few years or find their people. But it just means that in the high turnover of the lease business, they're just not a good lease pony. And so with those, we try to, if they're home consistently more than 3 months, we try to find people that pony is a really good match to, so that we don't have to find people that it's, a good enough match to every year.
Right. Wow. How do you do it all? And you show yourself, you compete yourself still.
Yep.
We're going to get the scoop on that in just a minute. Right now, we're going to take a quick break to hear from Lucas Equine Equipment. One of my recommendations for operating an efficient barn is to find ways to streamline the workflow of your everyday barn chores. Since we feed and water horses several times a day, figuring out how to make these tasks simpler and faster is one of the things that the designers at Lucas Equine do all the time. The stall fronts they make include time-saving features like integrated watering spigots, swivel doors for feeding from the aisleway, and even gravity latches that make morning turnout just a tad faster. The best way to design a barn for optimal workflow is to go online and use the Lucas Equine Stall Builder service. The Stall Builder service is a step-by-step form that you fill out, asking you questions about what's important to you, what features you'd like to have in your stall fronts, what your style preferences are, and information about your budget. And you can do this all from the comfort of your own home. Just go to lucasequine.com and click on the Stall Builder link. All right, this is a day in Piper's life, starting from the minute you get up in the morning.
So Emily handles everything, and everything is a conversation, and we work together, and she's very open, but she is handling all of the management of the animals. And we have the same ethos, and we're both all about fitness and diet and hoof care and all of the details. And so it works out really well. And I'm so glad I found her. And again, it's about the people. So I'm really lucky that I get to work with her, and I found someone who treats the day-to-day exactly how I believe that the overall should be treated.
So do you have one barn where your horses are and the ponies are?
Everything's at Emily's.
Everything's at Emily's. Okay. So your horses as well, and which is nice, so that you don't have to wake up every morning and think about what you're teaching for the day versus who's eating what at the barn. Okay. But I mean, you've got the podcast, you've got the magazine, you've got your teaching job. Even though Emily's a rock star, you still are involved in that. Then you need to find time for Piper.
I'm not that into time for Piper. I just love this. I love doing it. I love everything. So we're having our show strides. Book 5 come out this year. Book 4 come out this year. Book 5's coming out next year. I mean, all of our projects are just really moving forward, and I have a great team working on everything, and it's taken so long to build that team. My personal horses like to not work that hard.
I hear you on that one.
So they don't want to show up too much. And
do we really have to do this now, Mom?
So it's perfect. Every time I come, they're excited, and when I leave, they're excited, and it's perfect. So I'm able to kind of get stuff in and show. I don't practice very much. The kids at the barn lesson on them. They don't get a lot of pro rides, and I feel like that's part of supporting the sport and that kind of stuff. I'm able to provide a lot of opportunity to others because, when I can't lesson, somebody else gets that lesson essentially. And, at horse shows or when I am with them, I try to ride a lot and practice a lot and get as much done in a short period of time, which again is okay because it works with my horses were selected for my lifestyle. So it kind of works for everyone. They like that too. Ruben gets a month off like very periodically to, be a horse. He treadmills a lot. He would rather treadmill than be ridden. He doesn't like people fussing with him quite as much, but he needs to be really fit.
What kind of horse is he?
He's a Westphalian. My husband calls him the junkyard Ferrari because when you get a Ferrari from the junkyard and you rehab it, when you go back to the track, you either win or you wreck. So Ruben is a junkyard Ferrari. He can win any class anywhere, and he can also not win any class anywhere.
That's what makes it fun. That's what makes it fun, right?
Yep.
When you have a dial for your expectations, you can dial down, you can dial up, right? And any point in between, it's a completely customized experience. And having a horse who can be with you, no matter where that dial is priceless. I mean, your smile right now is just... And that's I think why we're so immersed in this industry is because when you do get it right, the smile and the joy that it evokes is priceless.
And he was a horse that was passed around to a lot of programs, and he was at a lot of barns, and no one could kind of figure him out or make him tick. And Emily really he wanted to be a horse. He likes to be turned out. He didn't know that in the beginning. He was very confused by turnout in the beginning. But he really, when we go to Kentucky, we ship him home at night. I say that he's on the commuter train. He comes home and goes in the paddock overnight, and then we'll go back to the show and show the next day. Because standing in the stall on the concrete all night, is just hard on his body and it's hard on his mind. And he's a warrior. He internalizes. He's a cribber. I think all the cribbers like to overthink things sometimes.
All the coping mechanisms they develop to kind of fit into our lifestyle.
Yep.
What do you think about the turnout paddocks that they have at the World Equestrian Center? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think they'll be used? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's amazing. I've had people tell me that they're too far away. And I'm like, oh my God. To me, there's no such thing as too far away when it comes to turning out your horse. I do think it's hard though, because when you talk about injury and risk, if you turn your horse out in a 5-acre field, every day, they don't think it's a big deal and aren't stupid about it. But when you don't turn your horse, when we have to like retrain them to be horses or retrain them to turn out or have buddies, like that's when the biggest risk is in all of this, injury wise. And I think that it's hard for a lot of people who don't have that regularly or who don't trust it. I laid over at a stable a couple of years ago with him that they weren't comfortable with him being out overnight. And I was like, he's happier that way. And, to me, it's like, we don't prep him, we don't lunge him, we don't do anything now when we have that program. But if he was stuck in the stall overnight and everything kind of bunched up, we would need to wake up in the morning and let him stretch and lunge and shake all those muscles around.
There's a lot of maintenance that has to be done to replace what turnout provides for the show horses.
Yes.
And,
yep.
I was having a conversation with I don't have a farrier at the moment. I have a hoof care specialist, and I have a thoroughbred who now has great feet. Her career is going to be limited because she does have an old stifle injury from the track. But so we thought, all right, let's put her, let's make her a fancy show horse. She's gorgeous.
Yeah.
There's I don't foresee any need to ever put shoes on her feet because they are so healthy. And we were talking about that most show horses are on beautiful footing. Their jobs are different, but the footing itself shouldn't really be a factor in whether or not a horse is shod. But the discussion was about how much money and time we spend compensating for our horse's health simply because we are not willing to take the risk of turning them out. And at some point, I would love to see real numbers on that. I don't know if anyone's undertaking that, but I'd love to see the comparative numbers on injections, on body work, on shoeing. Shoeing is so expensive. I know for a lot of horses, it is necessary for that point in their lives. But what are your thoughts on how much money and time and crap we do to compensate for what just turnout alone could do for a horse?
So many people say the sport's so expensive, and of course it's so expensive and it's so out of reach for so many people. But at the same time, like people say to me, I'd do anything to get to do this sport. And I'm like, great, move somewhere cheap. And they're like, oh no, I don't want to do that. And it's like, okay, that's your decision, but then you can't say you'll do anything. I mean, Emily is in the middle of nowhere. She's in Exonia, Wisconsin. That's kind of the joke. where the bleep is Exodia. But she has a farm and she grows her own hay, and she fertilizes her own hay field with her own manure pile. And it's a complete system. And it is, this sport can still be somewhat, asterisk, somewhat affordable if you do it that way. It's a people that, oh, I do anything to do it. Oh, I don't want to make my lunch, or I don't want to braid my horse. The more work you put in, the more you can do. And the more you live somewhere where other people don't want to live, the more options you have in this sport. And
we can do that now with remote work.
Yeah.
I think that may be the beginning of a paradigm shift, I'm hoping.
Yep. And I think a lot of people conflate fanciness with being about their horse. I mean, being about your horse doesn't need to be fancy. It needs to be about your horse. And I'm going to get all the emails, but on your fancy footing comment, I think that footing is very useful for horse show managers to maintain. I don't think that the evidence is there that the horses maintain or do well continuing to perform on horse show footing. I think it elicits the best performance out of them, but I think that's at a cost. And I think if you have that footing at home also, and your horse is going on that footing all the time, that's, again, a cost that you're going to have. I think you go to the horse show and you perform on that footing and you come home and your horse lives a little more natural life. I think your horse will have a great performance. I think if you're on that footing all the time, we see issues and stuff that comes up. I also think that, I hear other people think that or tell me that riding on various surface, oh my God, we can only ride him on that footing. I ride my horses, even the barefoot one, all over the horse show. I rode him last winter. We rode to the grocery store.
I do that. I go to the liquor store.
Yeah. And he's never overworked, but he can walk all over all kinds of surfaces and his feet maintain. And so I think it's such a larger picture. And one of the things I love is even 10 years ago, like Emily really had a holistic approach to this. Like her vets always talk to her farriers and her body workers talk with, like it's a team approach and everyone's looking for it. Kendra, our farrier, is really adamant about how diet impacts hooves. And so it's really holistic.
Do you think that minds are opening up? And this is a stereotype that I probably unfairly paint on top of the hunter jumper community. And maybe it's my area here, but there's this old school mindset. They know what they know, and their minds are not open to a more holistic approach, and how that holistic approach in horsekeeping can actually improve the animal's performance and be more affordable and save them money.
Yep.
And it happens in all disciplines, but do you feel like with the next generation with Emily's, I mean, she's a leader to me, she's a role model. Do you think that those coming up underneath her or after her are going to benefit from the types of trails that she's blazing? Do you see acceptance, a holistic approach happening, or is it still a struggle?
I think a little bit of both. I think there are a lot of old school people, and I always try to see things from people's perspective and walk a mile in their shoes. But at the end of the day, if you're still doing this sport the same way you were doing it 30 years ago, you're just wrong. We have learned so much. We have so much more data. And if you're not lifelong learning more, being more educated, and making better decisions, you're not doing right by your horses, and you're not a good horse person. All the great horse people I know have been doing this forever and learn every single day. Yeah. I ride with Carlton Brooks also, and he's in his 60s, and he has his notebook out every day, and he's taking notes on what he's seeing his horses do. And he's in the National Show Hunter Hall of Fame. He's won everything there is to win. He's had thousands of horses that he's produced. And yet every single day I saw him at Capital Challenge last week, and he has his notebook out, and he's like, how can I do this better? How can I do this horse better? What can I learn from my past? And he's kind of known for coming up with things that are, ridiculous to other people. And one of the ones he came up with a couple of years ago is he had this horse that was really cold, and he kind of couldn't always get the best performance out of him because the horse was so cold. And then he ended up watching someone else ride the horse, and that person was a more nervous rider than he is. He's calm. Yeah. He's really cold too. He's calm and has ice in his veins in the show ring. And the horse went a lot better for that person. And he was like, okay, how did that person who's, not as good as me ride the horse better? And he started going through everything and couldn't figure it out. And finally he was like, I wonder if it has to do with heart rate. So he got on the mounting block the next time he showed the horse, and he jumped up and down for 60 seconds until his heart rate got really high. He jumped on the horse, went right in the show ring when his heart rate was still up, and the horse gave him the best round he's ever had.
So when you say cold, you mean what do you mean by cold? Physically, temperature cold?
Quiet.
Just still?
No, quiet. Just slug, didn't want to engage in the job or jump really brilliantly, even though the horse is fit and strong and has a brilliant jump.
So he just needed a little hot blood on his back.
Needed a hot blood, and it ended up, And then he saw the other person ride it, and it was it went really well. How can I replicate that? And so then he started, every time he got on the horse show, he would jump up and down on the mounting block until his heart rate got up, and then he would
I love that.
Go right in the ring. And he learned that in his 60s. You should be learning everything about this sport every day. I mean, we all have so much to learn, no matter how much you've learned. And if you're closed off to learning, you're just wrong.
Willful ignorance has no place in the horse world.
Yep. And I think that a lot of people, back to Emily, a lot of people discounted that she can win at a high level because they look at how she does it. And it's the kids do almost all the work themselves. They're rarely grooms. She teaches young riders how to train young horses. She teaches young riders how the sport actually works. They're setting up, they're mucking stalls, everyone is involved, all hands on deck. It's kind of an old school barn that way. And I think a lot of people discounted that she could win at a high level because they would see this and be like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I do think the acceptance changes as the more she wins and shows that her program does work. I think a lot of trainers really struggle with the fact of if they have students or clients. And just like I differentiate sport and industry, I differentiate students and clients, because either you want to be a student of the sport and you want to learn everything and you appreciate what your trainer has to do for you, and you really listen to them and follow their program and essentially buy in, or you're a customer and the customer is always right, and you want things to be fancy and you want things to go your way, and you want to ride the horse you want to ride and go to the horse show you want a horse show at. And again, I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think our sport has plenty of places for students and for customers. We need students and customers for our sport to thrive in the next generations. But I think we all need to be honest with ourselves. Am I part of the sport or am I part of the industry? And make decisions accordingly. And then am I a student or am I a customer client? And make decisions accordingly. And we can all make better decisions for ourselves and our horses if we're honest about our place in the sport.
I'm so glad that you brought up that difference. At some point, we'll have to have a conversation about business modeling for trainers and professionals to take into account those two target markets. And we can't not have both of them in the barn. They kind of need to cohabitate. Yep. So maybe you and I can get together at some point and talk about that in the future. But we have to wrap. I know you've got some stuff going on in the rest of your day. Dr. Piper Klemm, thank you so very much for joining me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Boy, we covered a lot. Piper has so much insight. I'm really grateful for what she shared with us today. If you would like to find out more about the Plaid Horse magazine, the Plaidcast, show strides, and all of the wonderful things that Piper contributes to the equestrian industry, go to stallandstable.com and look up episode 83 show notes, and we'll hot link you right over to all of her content. So again, it's Piper Klemm, the Plaid Horse magazine, the Plaidcast podcast, which is available on Horse Radio Network or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to put November 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on your calendars, where I'm going to be moderating a panel discussion with Colton Woods, Lauren Spryzer, and Olympian Doug Payne on proven business models in the horse world, presented by Ride IQ. Go to stallandstable.com to find out more. And if you need help setting up your barn or with your business, whether it's consulting or coaching, you can book a consultation with me. Just go to stallandstable.com and click on the Book Now button. And that's going to be a wrap for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it.